Okay, folks, this is the Reid Method Insider Podcast. This is episode 70. And in our 70th episode, we welcome our guest with over 20 years experience in telecommunications and the ICT space. Her extensive knowledge in policy and regulation, technology and governance, gained through positions in both the public and private sector in the Caribbean, Southeast Asia, and the South Pacific, has propelled our guest to be among the top experts in telecommunications and ICT in the Caribbean region. Currently based in Jamaica, my hometown, she's a director of ICT Pulse Consulting Limited, a research and advisory firm on ICT and telecommunications issues. Tonight's guest is also the publisher, editor, and primary contributor to the online publication ICT Pulse, as well as a host and producer of the ICT Pulse podcast. With accreditation, LLB from the University of London, an MSc in communications and controls and digital signal processing, and from the University of, I've never heard of this university, Strathclyde, and a BSc in electrical and in computer engineering from the University of the West Indies. It is my distinct pleasure to welcome to episode 70, Michele Marius.
Thank you so much, Everold, and congratulations on your 70th episode.
Well, yes.
As I was listening to you, introduce me, I'm almost inclined to sort of turn and look behind me to see exactly who was being introduced, because as you can appreciate, you just sort of put your head down and just get on with things. And it's only perhaps in looking back sometimes that you recognize some of the things that you have accomplished. So just thank you so much for having me on.
Well, I'm looking at like different continents here that are nowhere near each other. Okay. The South Pacific, Southeast Asia, the Caribbean. I'm like, holy smokes. That's a lot of miles to travel to go to any of those locations, and a lot of oceans to cross. And, I had to go look up some of these accolades. I'm like, LLB, Bachelor of Law, MSc, I know that Master of Science and Bachelor of Science. I'm like, Michele, like you're reinventing the world. My goodness.
I don't think so, but just trying to chip away in my little corner. And as you can appreciate, where you start your journey, I guess professionally in particular, the way how life is, at least in this time, there are opportunities that come your way. So gone are the days when one probably would have just been inclined to sit at a job, for 30 years and, get your pen upon on exit, when you're retiring, and, a little handshake from, the company president, and you move into the sunset. I mean, I could never have charted the course of my life, even if I wanted to. It is beyond what I had probably thought, where I would have ended up. And probably even for me, luckily, I maybe my plans were, kind of loose, because then I was able to embrace the opportunities that came my way and not necessarily, had some very strongly held, views about where I needed to be and what I wanted to accomplish in the long term, starting, when I started my career.
Mm-hmm. That's outstanding. And you're absolutely right. You just never know where the opportunities take you. And especially if, you're persistent, and, I believe you have to be good at what you do. And because people do recognize talent when they see it. And I'm sure, and I recognized you respectfully for a couple of years now. I'm always constantly paying attention to your stuff on LinkedIn, and that's where we first met. On LinkedIn, and then I saw your recent accomplishment. Now, tell us about that last LinkedIn post where you were appointed. Is it to a board, or?
It was just a recognition, the women of Silicon Valley, of I guess women who are doing good things in STEM, and most of the recipients this year were of Caribbean heritage.
Mm-hmm.
directly, others, indirectly. And but it was just a wonderful recognition. So I think I guess I personally may not necessarily be inclined to go after those sorts of things, but I was gobsmacked, I guess, once I got wind that my name had been included. I had said, shared some details about myself, and which was included in, I think, like for each recipient there was a little article that they did a Q&A, so I'd answered the questions and forgot all about it until it came up on LinkedIn, and friends started to tag me on it. So yeah, so it was lovely, and
and it received a lot of attention, actually.
Yes.
So congratulations. That's amazing. I saw Silicon Valley, and I immediately thought of one of the guests who's been on this show 3 or 4 times, Stephen Benson, who's the founder of Badger Maps.
Okay.
An outside sales mapping company, and he's been on this show too. He's based in Silicon Valley, where they do all these great things. And I thought about you, and I'm like, geez, this is so cool. So Michele, we're going to dive into some of these questions here, and I definitely want to learn as much as I can from you here, and show us the audience as well. So when we talk about leveraging telecommunications and ICT in the Caribbean, we are currently in a world in which technology has fundamentally transformed human interaction and is now the most immediate context of life globally. Everybody rushed to communication and technology. This is how we're communicating right now and seeing each other.
Exactly.
So from your perspective, is this the new normal, and is the Caribbean region adapting efficiently enough to the inevitable?
It is absolutely the new normal. However, I don't think we are here in the Caribbean adopting it as efficiently as we might like. And I mean, there's so many reasons for that. The ecosystem itself is still underdeveloped, because as much as we may have access, let's say, to the latest phones and so on, you may find that in many countries, the fiber optic networks, the infrastructure that supports broadband communication is not as comprehensive as one might like. And we still suffer from bandwidth challenges, and those, I think, became even more pronounced, during COVID-19 and work from home and all of the traffic with, people streaming 24/7 and so on. And we are having, again, financial challenges, funding challenges, because to upgrade the infrastructure, to implement the requisite systems, you need funding. I guess our governments may have access to modest amounts, but whether or not, or the extent to which they could be applied in the ways that they need to be applied to help us to leapfrog in the ways in which we are leveraging technology, that might be limited. So we are also seeing that as much as, for example, the private sector is driving a lot of the changes and the transformation that we might want to see, I think across the region, it has not yet reached a critical mass for the public sector to begin to implement the systems and the support structures that would be needed. Because as you might appreciate, and you may have observed this, in Canada and where you have worked and lived before, that the private sector comes out in front. They are the ones pioneering things and spearheading things, and then government tends to sort of backfill and then bolster based on probably having a few years of experience and being able to observe what is going on, and then figuring out how best the ecosystem can be supported, facilitated, and developed. But I think technology is changing so quickly that government cannot really keep up, and what they might be observing today will be different from what is going to be occurring tomorrow.
Yeah.
So we're not at a place where it's easy to begin to put everything together, put all of the pieces together such that we might be able to really...
So they may not be able to adapt and pivot fast enough, because by the time they do so and, implement a system or one infrastructure, it's almost, obsolete in the next year.
Absolutely. That, I think, is the general thrust of things.
Wow. So is it easy, it's easy to see why so many may be intimidated or overwhelmed when it comes to ITC, as I am.
Mm-hmm.
How can we break it down? How can we break down ICT and its relevance in today's emerging economies like those of Jamaica and parts of the Caribbean, Trinidad, and other regions, so that we can make sense of it all?
Okay. I think that, ICT, information and communication technology, lots of words, and yes, it is quite intimidating. But what ultimately it has been doing, here it is, we all have cell phones, we have computers. Our homes are getting more and more connected. You might be able to, turn off your television from your smartphone and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But all of those are like the sort of bells and whistles of the system. And what it is doing is helping us. What ICT is doing is helping us to become more efficient, more productive, and to do more with less. Sorry.
Gotcha.
So that is it. If you look at it across the board, so in our personal lives, if you wanted to send a message to someone down the street or to find out about relatives back home here in Jamaica, what would you do? Send a letter? Not anymore.
Not anymore.
You call. And we can now call not necessarily just via your telecoms provider in terms of making a voice-based call, but you can have a video call, so you can actually see mom and dad, or sisters and relatives back home or whatever. So that is one aspect, let's say, from in your personal life. So it's helping you to do that. And here it is as well personally. We all have 24 hours in a day, but we all are trying to pack in even more. So back in the day when, for example, you had to write a letter or write a document, you no longer sit down and handwrite it. You may choose to do so if that is how you think and process things, but eventually you probably are going to put it on a word processor, edit it and judge it up, so you're not necessarily typing everything over and over again. And when you make small edits, you can do all of these things quite efficiently. And then when you're finished, you may no longer need to print it out. You can just send it via email to someone, and there would be a relatively short time, hopefully, within which they will reply. And therefore, you have this conversation going, and it doesn't take weeks or months to get, that engagement completed. And when you move now into the business space, most businesses nowadays are being charged with being cost effective, realizing cost savings, being competitive. And this is what then now ICT is now being used as a tool, or as tools to help an organization to become more efficient. Sadly, there are consequences, and some of them may not be pleasant, at least in the first instance, because of the changes and the transformation that might be required.
Mm-hmm.
But if, let's say you had an accounts department, and we are no longer sitting down with calculators or just a pen, a pencil and a piece of paper. You have software that you can use that can help you to tabulate and collate all of the numbers and so on. And instead of having someone walk from one department with a piece of paper with data information that needs to be entered into the system, we have now been able to digitize those systems such that everything is working on a common platform, and that we can then be more efficient, more cost effective, more productive in our time. And that is I think the beauty of what ICT does. Regardless of us being intimidated, if we whittle it down, that is it.
Wow. So there's a lot to unpack there. And in a lot of ways, we're using this technology and communications in so many different ways without even realizing that we are. Mm-hmm. Right. So for me, so far, what I'm taking away from this conversation is the ability to understand a lot more of what I'm already doing and how it relates to telecommunications, communications, technology, etc. So a follow-up question to this would be, what are the drivers of change in the world in which we live right now and function that make ICT so vital to growth in development of the region? Just based on the examples, the ideas you were just given.
Right. So some of it I would have come out in that in my previous response. Competition. Yes. We need to be globally competitive. Gone are the days when we had protected markets and so on. We now need to ensure that we as countries are operating efficiently, that when we are looking at foreign direct investment, of which we are eager to attract and maintain and retain, that we are providing systems that investors feel confident in, feel comfortable in, and that would allow them to maximize their investment in our countries. The whole issue of productivity. I mean, I was having a conversation with someone this morning, and they were talking about just how low the productivity is across the region. And you can see it, I guess, based on countries, the pace of development, the pace at which things happen is different, and it works to our benefit and our detriment, because we in the region are known for our sort of laid back lifestyle, which is wonderful on the one hand, but then it can be a hindrance when we are also looking at how competitive we are, how efficient we are, how effective we are in the things that we do. We also have to think about just the fact that this has become a global marketplace. Luckily, Jamaica is one of the bigger islands in the region. But can you imagine if you were on an island that had 10,000 or 50,000 people and you're trying to offer a service or produce a product? Mm-hmm. You will quickly run out of customers, and whether or not the business itself can be viable. But when you start to think of yourself as operating in a regional or even a global market,
yeah,
that it completely changes your mindset and even your approach to the business. But that can only occur due to ICT. Here in the Caribbean, it's a point I'm sure that you, Everold, would appreciate. Everybody thinks of the Caribbean as just this one homogeneous space, but we are a number of sovereign countries. Yes, we might have cultural similarities and so on, but there are nuances and differences as well. So there has been, and as you could appreciate, the whole premise of CARICOM and the OECS, CARICOM being the Caribbean Community, OECS being the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, where we have these island or sub-island groupings, or country groupings, I should say, because some of the members are not islands. And we are trying to find ways and means to create greater harmonization across the region. And one of the important ways we can do that is by leveraging ICT. So you have things like the CARICOM single market and economy. So these are elements, and even the single ICT space, which is supposed to be an element of that, where you're trying to create harmonized policies using telecommunications to leverage and to develop a more unified region, as much as we might have differences, and therefore allow us to benefit from economies of scale and scope that an island of 5,000 people might not be able to realize.
This is so interesting because I recently just completed an online course at Harvard on entrepreneurship in emerging economies.
Mm-hmm.
And there were so many examples in that course on how small islands or even big countries where, 70-80% of the population really is still poor,
Mm-hmm.
and they may have some of the greatest talents, but don't have the access to showcase that talent.
Right.
And their only true marketplace is to their local markets. It's the local vendors, it's to the community, and no one's available to show them how to get that out, not just to create a bigger market, not just across the country, but across the world. And it literally, come to think of it, I had registered a company a couple of years ago where the timing couldn't be better to launch this company right now, because so many countries are in the same issue. You take, for example, the current, where Jamaica and many other islands thrive on tourism.
Yes.
Right. Mm-hmm. So those vendors and folks that would go to the market and sell their crafts and arts and whatever, items, that tourism market is pretty much very slow and will be for the foreseeable future.
Yes.
What is their plan B? Right? Right? What is their plan B? And most of them don't have a plan B. They're going to hope and pray until the market comes back, whenever that is. But there are opportunities. There may be opportunities for them to showcase their products, not just locally, but internationally. And there is an opportunity for them that, where communications and technology can literally change the scope and change their direction to doing things that they otherwise were not even considering.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So go ahead.
Oh, yeah. And I would just wanted to add, because I think, COVID-19 has really, I think, begun to open the eyes of a lot of people to some of the opportunities, because it's easy when your life is predictable. Mm-hmm. If you are, a vendor or, someone probably working in the industries that have been adversely affected by COVID-19, such as hospitality and tourism, that you can set up your little stall, let's say on the pier, so when the cruise ships come by, you can get, business from them. All right, the cruise ships have not been coming. What can you do?
Exactly.
And, to the extent that probably they are now beginning to see that there may be opportunities, a lot of people during this time have been using WhatsApp to secure business, using Facebook, setting up a little Facebook page, taking a couple of photographs of some of the products and trying to build at least some sort of, I'm not even sure if I would say a business, but trying to generate income.
Or some sort of awareness,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So COVID-19 probably, as devastating as it has been, there is always a silver lining, I think, and it is the opportunities that it is probably forcing us to see and to revisit.
Yeah. To learn a little bit more and to see that, to learn more about our true capabilities. And a lot of this, by doing so, can actually lead to bigger and better opportunities. Exactly. than ever before imagined. It's exactly. Almost like we're all being forced, to re-engage and to analyze, and assess our current space and what the future might hold for us. Yeah. And people have to pivot. Like you don't have a choice right now, in the world, frankly. I don't know a single individual who has not had to alter the way they conduct their lives for now and the foreseeable future. So who knows what, will come in the future. We just need to know that there's an opportunity to adapt, and to pivot and to probably not just to do that for ourselves, but to be a better and bigger contributor to the world.
Absolutely.
And that's where I see the opportunity is how can we use this, technology and communication and information to benefit ourselves, but more importantly, how to better the world, So I think that's so vital. So, so where may the opportunities be to survive and thrive within the region for those listening, as compared to when the opportunities such as unprecedented connectivity. I think we talked a little bit about there's connectivity and mass messaging via like WhatsApp, for example. Economies that are more connected than ever before. The region is being forced to connect and to communicate more so than they ever did. And then global competitiveness. Where's the downside, and where do you think the upside is?
Okay. All right. That's a huge question.
That's a huge question. I know. Okay. And you're the lady for it.
Oh my gosh. All right. So opportunities. Personally, I think that there is probably opportunities in almost every area of our lives here in the Caribbean region. I don't think we've begun to plumb the depths of any one sectors yet. Some of them are probably more apparent. So, for example, education coming out of COVID-19 and just the whole importance of online education and further improving the systems that are in place. Because looking at that one, we have had many initiatives in many islands across the region, for example, as it relates to tablets in schools, right? But one might say it was supposed to be something that you would probably use it as a supplement. Much of the learning is going to be happening in the classroom with the teacher in front and so on, but you might be probably doing a lot of maybe the sort of testing and maybe a little bit of remediation on this device. But now that one is in a situation where schools are closed, yes, some of them might open come September, but we're still not quite sure exactly how everything is going to pan out. We actually need to have better systems and facilities to facilitate online learning. Some of the many classes have been conducted on platforms such as Zoom, and that might be fine, but maybe there are things that could be better. What other learning tools can be developed? There might be testing tools that might be needed as well. So things like that, for example, in education, agriculture is a big one.
Yes.
Right? Fisheries, even the creative industries. So I think we're just awash with opportunities. And the thing is that there are just many problems. I think so many of us may already be systems in place that are working okay, but you need someone who is going to just think about it differently. Could it be done better? Right? And it is the transformation and the disruption that can happen. And some of the disruption doesn't have to be, I don't want to say, life-changing is what comes to me, but or
dramatic.
Yes, exactly. Dramatic, that is the word. It could be just something that helps to improve the system, to make it more efficient, to allow people to be more productive. And some of it is, much of it may already exist, but it's to apply it and to customize it for the needs of the region, specific islands, or for the region as a whole. And just going along that point, one also has to consider the fact that oftentimes for entrepreneurs locally, they will create solutions to solve a local problem. But the way how they have designed a solution, it is not readily transferable to other countries.
Gotcha.
And one can say, try to figure out what might be the commonalities that could make it more marketable, whether or not just within the region or even in other developing countries, other small island developing states. So I think that we can be certainly a hotbed and a test bed for opportunities. Now, downsides. I think the big one for me, and I think sometimes we rely on government supposedly to create the enabling environment. And while that is true, as I said before, government is often the follower, not the leader, where innovation is concerned. So we need to just forge ahead. I think the downside might be, and I'm not even sure if it's a downside, but the readiness of the population. So let's say whether or not you're doing something agriculture or fisheries or education, and the readiness of teachers and farmers and so on to take the solutions, to use the solutions that are being proposed, and whether or not the infrastructure is present to support those solutions. So I guess these are not necessarily downsides, but I guess elements that might hinder the successful realization and implementation of solutions. Downsides.
What about red tape? What about the process? Like sometimes getting things done, is not as efficient. I mean, in good times, they're not efficient, let alone now with COVID.
Yes. Well, yes, the red tape is real and it's still there. And I think to varying degrees has become exacerbated by COVID-19.
Probably just thicker red tape now.
Absolutely. But I think, and I'm hopeful, I'm keeping my fingers crossed, because I think so many countries realized through COVID-19 what they needed to do. E-government, for example, seamless government, more efficient government, all of these wonderful words and terms have been bandied about the region for probably a good 15 years by now. And I guess, yes, there has been progress made, but there's the things to really shift the needle now, moving from, if, for example, you want to conduct some business, let's say with tax authority, the tax office here in Jamaica, so inland revenue elsewhere, sometimes they have the records. However, if you're looking for something like a tax compliance certificate, so it's a certificate that is given to say that you have complied with, you're up to date with, or all of the agencies to whom taxes must be paid are satisfied with the state of your accounts. And much of that monies are paid directly into the tax office here. However, if you want a tax compliance certificate, you have to go around to every one of the agencies in person.
Oh my goodness.
To get the requisite clearance, which you then carry back to the tax office to get them to issue you with the tax compliance certificate. So
that's a lot of redundancy.
Exactly. So you see, we have computers, you can pay your taxes online, you can pay your driver's license online, you can renew your vehicle registration, etc. online. Wonderful. But then these are the things now, the critical things that are still outstanding, for example. And I guess,
So you can do all of those things individually online, and they're all within government,
yes.
But you can't, those systems do not sync or are linked together to get one report to say that this person has paid up everything.
I would think so. I think a lot of it probably has legal implications because, various organizations have responsibilities. So as much as the tax office, for example, might be able to collect all the revenues on their behalf and put it in the requisite accounts, you need the authorization from the specific agency. But in this day and age, do I still need to walk around? And as I said, I think in every Caribbean country, people will have their own sub-stories and multitudes of sub-stories about the things that waste a lot of their time that you would hope by now we would be able to do a lot more efficiently and effectively.
So do you think the Caribbean region is engaged with and adapting to these possibilities enough, or is there significant opportunities for bigger and useful growth? So, I mean, you just described one circumstance. Is it like you said, is it too much red tape? Is it people are not willing? Is it they just want it done? What is the issue here?
Oh, okay. So I think definitely there are significant opportunities for bigger and more useful growth.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we perhaps have not, we talk a good talk, right? Right? And as a Caribbean person, I guess I can admit that, right?
Yes.
We are learned, we are bright. We can put down the best plans and the best, documents and dossiers with anybody around the world. We have that down.
Mm-hmm.
But whether or not, or the extent to which we are intentional or sufficiently intentional with these plans to try to realize them in a realistic and timely fashion. Because, for example, many countries across the region have developed, for example, national ICT plans, national sustainable development plans, and so on. And oftentimes these plans might have an effective period from maybe 5 to 20 years, depending. But after you have probably had the draft prepared, and that might be done by a consultant, there would need to be a process through which it gets ratified.
Mm-hmm.
It might need, some sort of public consultation. Once everybody is relatively satisfied, it probably then needs to make its way to cabinet and eventually be laid in parliament or whatever the process is, to have it formally recognized as a national plan.
Mm-hmm.
However, you may find that the process to get it to that point takes years, Then, so by that time now, depending on the life of the project, you now need to go and try and figure out how you're going to get funding. And then on top of that, you are looking to set up the various projects that then need to be implemented and getting, bids and so on. So by the time you actually get down to it, what often happens is that to varying degrees, the plan probably is becoming obsolete.
Yeah, the technology has evolved way past its time.
And then what you have is that the scope of the projects are no longer relevant. You then also have that elections come and things get shifted and we can't get back on track. And we are still also limited by the fundamentals, whether or not the policy frameworks are in place, the legal frameworks are in place, the infrastructure is there upon which to then just build. So, and again, if you have in a plan that you need to have, a new piece of legislation, after you have gotten the plan approved, you need to develop the policy. You need to then develop the legislation. It needs to be tabled in Parliament. Depending on the country, legislation takes years to get approved through the parliamentary process. So again, you just find that a lot of time goes and we actually don't get much done. And I think it really requires a real concerted effort to try to really move the needle forward, especially where technology is concerned, because as you said, things are moving just so quickly that you're likely to suffer from obsolescence before you even get started.
Yeah, and that's just such a big, sometimes demotivator, because you are, you got this grand plan, you've got support, you've got some back end, and what stops you is pretty much your own process within your country or your island.
Yes.
And, somebody else by that time comes up with the idea, and you see literally another company who has funding. And this happens so often that your idea is literally now passing you by in front of you because another company has figured it out, has figured out how to solve this problem and had funding, from private sources or whatever. And I just think this is such a missed opportunity for a lot of these emerging economies where people with ideas who create these ideas and are ready to go just really don't get the opportunity to excel and to bring their products to market or even just to get heard. And it just falls by the wayside. So it's very important to, I think, well, there's one of the issues that need to be realized, especially in these times, that I believe a lot of the answers to a lot of these Caribbean region, the problems, is right there in the local communities.
Absolutely.
Right? But the talent is there. Go ahead.
Yeah, it was just a point I wanted to make on funding, because I think funding is a challenge in the region, and oftentimes, probably depending on the project and the initiative, that we're looking for, external support. So donor funds, probably taking loans from the World Bank, International, Inter-American Development Bank, and so on, agencies such as those. But what the projects that you might want to finance has to be aligned with what these donor agencies are prepared to finance. And sometimes there is a disconnect, and that can also be a challenge as well. So a lot of it is just, though, ultimately too many things, the processes can take too long, and we ultimately run out of time.
So I have my aunt in the Cayman Islands watching right now, and she says, need to shift the mindset of leaders who are stagnant. And I'm sure there's leaders with, stagnant mindsets right now. I mean, leaders, that's a big part of running any company or any organization or country. I think, as a matter of fact, I think there's a pretty good example of that right now that the world is experiencing. So
Understood.
We won't call any names, but yes. No, that's this is a very deep conversation, and I'm so thrilled to have you on episode 70 of the podcast, folks, as we discuss telecommunications and ICT in the Caribbean, these emerging economies, with Michele Marius. We've been connected on LinkedIn for years, and I've always seen her. And the one thing I have to tell you right off the bat, I think you have one of the best profile pictures on LinkedIn. So,
thank you.
From a guy to a lady, I'm gonna sneak that in.
Okay, then. Thank you very much.
All right. So, as in emerging economies where the biggest strength is people, and I think we've already established that in our conversation, that the biggest strength is people. What would you say to individuals and businesses on how to better leverage ICT to connect their, development and aspirations to implementation?
Okay. All right. Let me just give that a little thought.
Yes.
I think just to start, that for so many of us, we have gotten caught up in just the busyness of our lives, and even, minutia. I am sure that, when you get up in the morning, or even, before you go to bed at night, and you sort of think through your day, you have so much that you need to do. And it can be difficult to just find the bandwidth, to think through, what you might need, the changes that you might want to make, the improvements that you might want to make, how to leverage ICT in your business. And one of the things that I found, for example, just pointing this out through just the COVID-19 experience, is that, so for many businesses, COVID-19 happened, there was going to be lockdowns and so on. And their business model began to flounder to varying degrees. And panic sets in. But what I found is that sometimes people are not prepared to sit down and to do the analysis themselves, or to try to figure out, how might I be able to salvage my business? How might I be able to leverage ICT, or the tools that are around me to figure out how to pivot, and how I might be able to keep a roof over my head, or keep my employees, paid and taken, and being able to take care of their families. People just wanted somebody to give them an answer. Tell me what to do. I don't want to have to think. And I think that one of the big challenges that we have is just to be able to make the time to be able to analyze our situation, because oftentimes, and especially for micro and small businesses, it is the leaders who know their business best, who understand, the business model and what it is that they're trying to do, and what might be some of the nuances of the business. So even if you were to probably try to hire a consultant or an advisor, you still need to bring your domain expertise to bear to help to ensure that the solutions that are being proposed are the right fit for your business. So I think that we therefore need to spend the time to conceptualize and also to try to be realistic with the implementation, but I think be aggressive enough, in terms of the timelines that you give yourself, so that things don't drag on for too long. Because again, what will happen is that, we live in a dynamic space. So you want to ensure that the solution that you have is still relevant to the problem that you think you're trying to solve.
Absolutely. And that's used right now as a race against time, especially with how fast technology is moving and the multitude of opportunities out there. And I think this is such a vital time for everyone in the region, whether you're in the Caribbean, North America, or Asia, where, it's a defining moment in our lifetimes. I mean, the only thing like this happened almost a century ago, or probably just over a century ago. I think it's 108 years now, the last major time. So we're at a crossroads where it's really up to us, I think, in a big way.
Yes.
To step up. Don't be afraid to put your ideas out there. Don't be afraid to take action, to ask, to seek out advice from professionals, from friends, and from your government, from your local officials, from all the different resources. A little bit of work, a little bit of grunt work can change your life, can change your family's life, can change your country. The right ideas. So with that, sure.
Well, yeah, one more point I want to make is that we sometimes can be a victim of our own success, because if you had a business model that was working before, you may find that you are inclined to try to figure out how to get back to that, and not open yourself up to the opportunities that the circumstances might be providing. And I think it's easier said than done, and probably this is where, for example, external advisors become useful, is just to help us or force us to sort of think outside of the box. Yes, you may eventually dismiss the idea, but at least be able to entertain it, see whether or not it has legs, and then decide whether or not it might be a good fit for your organization or even for your life, depending on the circumstances. And take it from there, as opposed to, I think, being rigidly holding on to what might be the status quo.
I mean, and you'll hear from time to time where people say the old economy is not coming back.
Absolutely.
Right. So what you've done before, even if you did it well, we now need to find a way to do it, to pivot. And how to deliver, how to make things better. And I think one of the fundamental criteria in whatever we do going forward is, number one, yes, it's a business and it's a livelihood for me and my family, but people have to answer the one fundamental question: how does it make other people's lives better? Exactly. How does it improve other people's lives? And if that's your main focus on helping everybody, whether it's being your local community, your town, city, or country, or the world, you can impact people anywhere today with technology.
Right.
I'm in Toronto. You're in Jamaica. We have people watching this podcast from Ireland, the UK, every countries I've never even heard of. Watch this show, and it's just unbelievable. India is among the top 5 countries that listen to this show. We have people from Greece, all over Southeast Asia, the Middle East, from time to time. So you put it out there, folks. You put the idea out there or the product or the service, and people will come. There's over 7 billion people in the world.
Yes.
And, to ship products or to get ideas across the world is not that hard anymore. So there's all sorts of possibilities. So how would you sum up as we wrap up this episode here, Michele, this episode 70? How would you sum up the ICT opportunities within the region? How would you sum up the opportunities?
I think that the Caribbean is awash with opportunity, certainly in the ICT space. So whether or not it is with respect to purely technology-driven solutions, but certainly other things that can leverage technology. So I think we are continually being charged, as I've been saying, to do things more efficiently, more effectively, to be more productive. And oftentimes ICT and technology might be a way to help to support that. And so I think that, again, the region is awash in opportunity, but the environment may not be for the faint of heart. As you can appreciate, we spoke about my experiences with the tax office here in Jamaica, but also just in terms of just the ecosystem and in terms of business, it's easy, for example, here in Jamaica to set up a business, but you may find that the ecosystem is not as developed as in Canada or in other countries outside of the region. And the support for entrepreneurship and innovation may not be as well established here in the region. So I think it's certainly something that individuals could consider, because there are lots of problems and challenges, probably might be a better word than to say problem. There are lots of challenges that could benefit from a solution. I do think we also need to be mindful in having these solutions about, I guess, managing the changes that one is probably trying to foster, because it might require people to think differently, approach things differently, and to be not as intimidated by technology as they might be. But it's also paradoxical because, here in the region, we like having the latest smartphone and, all of the amenities. And, we are complaining bitterly about the quality of the broadband service that we are getting, especially since we want to be streaming Netflix and on, multitude of Zoom calls and so on. So, in some ways we haven't missed a beat, but then there is still paradoxically a sense of being intimidated by technology. So it may be something that, we also just need to consider as well.
Well, when I hear that and I see that, and I know plenty of people in the Caribbean, including they're right at home in Jamaica, where they're pretty tech savvy where they want to be tech savvy.
Yes.
Right? They're pretty tech savvy on WhatsApp, Facebook, streaming videos, movies, whatnot. Well, we just need to refocus some of that savviness to ICT and information and business.
Yes.
Right? It's the same stuff that's involved. It's no different. I know people take a lot of pictures of themselves and their family, which is great, but you could also be taking pictures of your products and services and selling it.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And you could be communicating and making a video. Instead of watching a whole bunch of Netflix, you could make a video of your product and watch that.
Yes.
Right?
So creating content on social media.
Yeah. So it's really just shifting the mindset a little bit, not a lot. If you shift your mindset, 20%, 30% to using that same approach and technology to productivity and innovation and sales and development, hey, you never know what might come back your way. It's no different. It's no different than starting this podcast. I had no idea where it was going. I didn't even know what a podcast was, Michele. And my social media manager said, well, you better do podcasts. And I'm like, what the hell's a podcast?
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. However, 70 episodes later, I'm sure you know what a podcast is now.
Yes, I sure do. And one of the things I'll share with our audience, you know, in the Caribbean, and I love the Caribbean, and I love to see people do well, and great examples like yourself is, don't set your goals small. You know, those goals need to be massive goals. And part of my massive goal was launching this podcast was to have some of the best speakers in the world, you know, such as Les Brown, who's been on the show 3 times, Tom Hopkins many times, people from Silicon Valley who's been on numerous times. And now, no different with the technology that we're encouraging our fellow men to use and to start businesses and to innovate, is once you start and you remain consistent, it starts coming back the other way. Now, I can't keep up with the requests.
Right.
People wanting to appear on my show.
Yes.
I have agents literally every day sending requests for guests to appear on my show. I don't have to search for anybody anymore.
Wonderful.
Right. Wonderful. So it's no different. I didn't know which button to press. I literally had to go to a studio for the first 2 years and have them do everything. And I was, you know, now I have my own studio because you learn as you go. And that's just part of the process.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Yes.
So what would you leave with the audience? What tips would you leave? You know, I mean, we can talk about, you know, we're approaching an hour here, but this has been a great show. This has been highly in-depth, highly educational for me. I'm taking away a lot from this, and I very much appreciate your level of expertise and facts. I mean, here is somebody that's speaking to us folks. You know, there's no notes. There's just straight up from knowledge and experience and leadership. I can tell that you're a born leader, and, you know, all these ideas and innovation and technology. So what do we leave the audience with? Let's say how they can educate themselves, innovate, and then hopefully celebrate the progress. Okay.
So, well, when you say, and I guess the audience being people outside of the region, I'm just trying to
well, I would say, I mean, in the region and out. I mean, we're talking, if we're trying to reach the folks in the Caribbean, I mean, I guess it's 2 different audiences, right? Yes. But let's say this was for the Caribbean audience. You know, how would you, what tips would you leave with them on how to take advantage of what we're going through right now?
I think clearly there are challenges that need to be solved. And if there is one that speaks to you specifically, think about, you know, what might be ways that it could be solved. And, you know, we luckily live in a time where the internet is, widely available, and the resources available on the internet, such that there may be just general information you might need to understand about the context about what it is that you, in the context of the area in which you might want to focus on. There may be solutions already that might need to be tweaked, or maybe based on how you define the problem, we might be able to customize something. There may be opportunities for synergies based on, you know, strategic partnerships, whether within the region, outside the region. So the whole issue of education can be, you know, quite comprehensive and a bit of a rabbit hole to go down. So that would, I think, would be the first. In terms of, you know, innovating and innovation, it is certainly about trying to think outside the box, as is the saying. But again, as you said, the solutions doesn't necessarily need to be, you know, dramatic, but it could be an improvement to what the status quo might be. I also want to caution people, especially for those in the region, about thinking highly locally on solutions, because you may not be able to scale it for you know, profitability and long-term viability. So think about, yes, you might think of the solution to a particular problem in your community, in your country, but could the solution be adjusted in such a way such that it is applicable and can be implemented in other Caribbean countries, in other countries? because it can be quite disheartening, I think, and many local entrepreneurs, I think, have learned the hard way that it might have been a brilliant idea, but if you cannot find a way to scale it outside of our relatively small populations, it may die a natural death eventually.
Mm-hmm.
Celebrate. I don't know if I need to tell any Caribbean person how to celebrate. We may even celebrate a little too much.
Yeah.
But I think the point, though, is that to recognize our achievements and to also be thinking, of the next step. What could be the next step? How can the product evolve or the service evolve?
Mm-hmm.
How can we make it better than it was before and continually improve? Because I do think that, and we've seen it in traditional businesses, they came up with one product and it hasn't been tweaked in 20, 30 years. But now we are being forced by the nature of the environment in which we live, and not necessarily just in terms of technology, but the competitive space that we are in, and how consumers themselves have changed and become more demanding, that you need to be continually adding value. And I think as much as we celebrate, we also need to think of what will be the next step to take it to the next level.
Well, this has been outstanding, Michele. So any final takeaway that you want to leave the audience with tonight?
Nothing specific in terms of, I think we have plumbed quite a bit.
We have done quite a bit, I must admit. So thank you.
But I think, I'm happy to, if they would love to reach out and we can talk some more, or certainly, figure out how best we might be able to collaborate. I'm available on social media. If you go to ICT Pulse or LinkedIn, I'm happy to connect, and Facebook as well. We're also on Twitter, that is ICT Pulse. So I just think that hopefully people will walk away with an open mind, and that they will look at their own communities and lives and see what ICT is doing in their lives and how their lives have benefited from technology, and recognize that it is here to stay. We are probably going to become even more reliant on it. And yes, personally, we may need to have some sort of balance, whatever that is for us. So, whether or not is that, you ensure that you don't check your smartphone before you go to bed, or, and don't wake up in the middle of the night to check your messages and those sorts of things. But I think we will benefit from embracing technology and seeing how best we can leverage it in our lives. For those who are in the region, we are an innovative people. I think we have created many products that have served the world well. However, the challenge that we have is that we often may not have had the foresight to scale it or to customize it, but we have been the inspiration for so many things. And it's about time that we, I think, enjoy and benefit from the fruits of our labor.
Well said. Absolutely. I think it's time we step up and, not just be the innovators and creators, but be the ones that bring it to market, scale it, and reap the rewards, continuously of our benefits. I mean, look at every supermarket you go here in Canada. Doesn't matter what chain, there's Jamaican food.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Even yellow yam and sweet potato. Doesn't matter. Okay. Sardines, mackerel, not just Jamaican products. Yeah. Products from Trinidad. Like there's a whole West Indian section. There's a whole Caribbean section. There's a whole Indian section. So I'm proud. I mean, we've always been, innovative. Look at our music. It's everywhere. There's not a radio station that doesn't play reggae music or some sort of Jamaican variety of music.
Right.
It's everywhere. It's the Jamaican restaurants. You don't have to go very far to find one here.
Yeah. So Carnival is, has become big everywhere. Yes. So, yeah, I think we we have a lot in the region to be proud of. And I mean, Lord knows we can be hard on ourselves. And I'm not saying that we should not aspire for more and to do more. But I think we also need to recognize that we are of value to the world, and we have been of value to the world. And we have been pioneers. As I'm talking to you, something that came to mind is that, something as simple as the OECS dollar and the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. We think of the euro as this, wonderful unified currency, but the EC dollar predates the euro. Right?
There you go.
So we have been doing wonderful things. It's just sometimes that we don't recognize it.
Well, there you go. Well, Michele, I want to thank you for spending an hour with me on the show. It's an hour well spent after, a long day, I'm sure, for both of us. And I know you were on LinkedIn early this morning as I was, so I knew we were both up at it early.
Yes.
And so I want to thank you for your major contribution to the ICT and communication technology space, and the whole opportunities that you're creating in the region and around the world, and especially there in Jamaica. I applaud you for what you're doing and all the accomplishments and accolades. So, I hope we continue our discussions, and I look forward to, our ongoing relationship.
Thank you so much for having me, Everold. It was indeed a pleasure. I mean, I glanced at my watch, I guess, a little while ago and saw the time, and I was like, but where did the time go? But I really enjoyed the conversation. It certainly had me thinking as well. And, I wish you all the best. Congratulations on your 70th episode. Thank you. I hope we will be continuing the conversation in various different ways in the future.
Well, I'm sure 70 is a lucky number because I had Michele on this episode.
Thank you.
Thank you.